Well, this bench project has been stretching out for way too long, and there are, of course, plenty of reasons or probably just excuses for this, but the upshot is that I've been taking my time, working it in around every other thing that's part of this YouTube life and enjoying the whole process mostly. I can feel my familiarity and really facility with the tools and the processes of furniture building getting stronger as I go along, in large part because Kenny has been helping out and really keeping a weather eye on me and the progress. He's saved me more than once, and I will never forget this part of the journey that began 6 years ago when I cut down the oak trees that these boards came out of. Let me give you one last kind of a close-up to how that interior drawer guide mechanism works. Because if you do it this way, you will want to have seen it, and if you do it the other way, the way Ken did it, you'll be able to figure it out off the drawings. But here's an up-close and personal look of the way those pieces go together. So I threw a couple screws in each one of these things. On the corner, they stop at the same length as the back of the guide of the supporting rail on the front. They go in there like that. They go in there like that. I numbered them carefully. Let's see if that works out. Same thing here. Put a couple screws in just so these things are married together and these overhangs are right. And that is flush once everything's put in place because the front rails lock these into the right location. I threw a screw back there in each one of those. And then up at the top, I just screwed in the top guides, the top rail to keep the top drawers from tipping out. The bottom of that one is mortised clear through this. This one is a half lap on the outside piece and a half lap at the top. Captured by this rail also. Nothing to it. All right, it's time to sand off the exterior, get rid of some pencil marks, make sure it's ready for stain, chamfer the corners on the outside of the vents, put this thing together. Kenny just saved me. He said, why are you taking that apart? Good point. I don't need to sand or finish any of this. It's just interior. So I'm putting that screw back in and going to set this aside and just concentrate on the part that the world can see. So one of the big advantages of doing this test bench after seeing Kenny's bench, so there's two advantages. See what you want to do, make a beta model and then try to do it for real, was that I got a chance to do the little detail that he put on the corner of his bench, which is chamfering the corners of these big stiles and rails and stopping about an inch short of the corner. Now, I don't know if that's utterly unique to Ken Jordan's artistic interpretation, but it was the first time I'd ever seen it. And so that's where we're at. I'm going to chamfer these pieces if I can keep track. I put marks on there. But the first thing is to do it on a test piece. I think I've got it about right, but at this point, I'm not taking any chance on wrecking it. Got a piece of junk oak. I'm going to run a little test, second time, but redundancy counts. It's about 1/4 of an inch across that face, just a little less, real close to what I did on the beta. Ken told me that this design feature is an example of something called an ARRIS, A-R-R-I-S. The definition is a sharp edge formed by the meeting of two flat or curved surfaces. Well, with this particular design element, uniformity and regularity is critical in order for this thing to work out right and not just look like a botch. You got to control where it starts, where it stops, and how even it is. It all matters. This is just one little example of how extensive Ken's knowledge of these things still is, even after his stroke. I'm beginning to feel hopeful. I've been concerned about the edges of these panels slipping into the grooves that were routed. I mean, it was kind of a net fit. I sanded them. Darn if it didn't go together. So I'm going to kind of take a couple of these off and check this for square, and then Kenny's going to encourage me to put some glue on here and make it permanent, I think. So in a typical overexertion, I was getting ready to flip this over so I could run the diagonals with a tape. Ken said, well, get your square. Oh, the light blinks on. So the square drops in here. And boy, it's pretty close. There's a little discrepancy there.
Okay, so bolt that a little bit in there.
Yeah.
Over here.
Don't move. Let me get a rubber mallet.
Yeah, go ahead and get a rubber.
Pretty good, man.
Okay.
I think that's about the average, isn't it?
Yep.
Glue. Take her apart and glue her.
Do it.
Now, wood glue is something that I occasionally have used over the last 46 years as a builder, but I never really needed to understand it until this project started. And so, as always, Kenny was able to give me a jump start by pointing out that Titebond has become his glue of choice, and that since we were coming into fall and winter when I was actually digging into this project, and since my shop is not insulated and only barely heated, Titebond 3 Ultimate's 45-degree minimum temperature range made it the best choice, maybe the only choice. It has worked great, with a longer open time, allowing more time to make multiple joints come together at once. But it does leave a pretty dark glue line in the joints if they don't suck all the way up. Now, this is not a huge problem with this bench project, but it would be a heartache on a maple or birch piece of woodwork that you invest hours in. I don't know if I filmed it, I don't know if you picked up on it, but clamping this thing together was a knockdown, drag-out brawl, and I wouldn't have made it without Ken. He had some real helpful suggestions that scared the daylights out of me, but we made it happen. We had to rack it. After it was in and the joints were glued, we had to rack it about 1/4 of an inch, but it went just in the nick of time. I got a good suggestion from David Quarterman, part of the Essential Craftsman Academy, to consider using epoxy. Slower set, wouldn't have to rush the joints. Kenny said, no, we can do that at least this far without it, and epoxy is a mess. So anyway, so far, so good, I think. With the clamps off, I am greatly relieved to report it's square and it is reasonably straight. So we're going to stand it up and figure out how to put the end panels, which are already stained and glued, in place to kind of hold this thing in its shape. So we've ended up with a problem. There's sort of a cumulative gain, not embedding this last channel, this last panel far enough over there, and we didn't see that because that was down on the table, which means that the buzzsaw is going to come to the rescue. The little oscillating miracle worker. I've clamped a straight edge, scribed a line. We're going to cut off about 1/8 of an inch on that panel, chisel it right down to 0 in the corner, and see if we can close this joint up, because it was a sad thing to see when we put it in there a minute ago. Well, to this point, I'd made a couple little blunders, had to miscut, I don't know, 5 or 6 pieces, recut 5 or 6 pieces, changed directions on the interior drawer supporting mechanism, and all those things were just no big deal. But I almost made a mistake that was fatal. And that was when I shaped the edges of these panels to go in the 1/4-inch slots. I should have taken them down a little. The fit was too tight, and like I showed you, it caused a little bit of rework, a lot of anxiety, and almost a shipwreck. So the divider that goes in the middle between the cabinet and the drawers, I am taking it down. I have reset the depth on that raised panel cutter, and I'm pulling out another strong 32nd, almost a 16th. Well, 32nd on the bottom. So the bottom drops right in, the top will drop right in, and the sides won't have to be a press fit. I think that's a more hopeful situation when it comes right down to assembling 5 or 6 glue joints at once. At this point, my friends, it's just like the concrete. It's in the wall, you vibrated it, you dealt with the blowouts, and you're not going to know how you did until day after tomorrow. Well, we're hopeful. I'm glad Kenny's here, because this scared the daylights out of me, and I'm not sure it was not without justification. But anyway, it's up. I'm going to throw the spreaders in here with the dovetails just to make sure that this is all right, but we're a lot closer than we were a month ago. None of these other panels are glued in. Ken didn't think it was a good idea. Got to be room for it to move around a little bit. But this one is going to be holding up one side of the drawers. And so we're going to squirt some glue down in here, kind of in the middle part. About like that. And then see if we can drop that panel down in there. So once it's hard, everything will be stable. A D-handle drill is so much better than trying to use a pistol grip like I was yesterday. This D-handle drill is my go-to for drilling horizontally, especially larger diameter holes, because the inline aspect of the grip, along with the handle that's projecting out from the side, lets me push so much harder, so much easier, and keep track of square in both directions as I go. And besides that, if it does bind up, it's not near as likely to break my hands, which is a good thing, because there is more than 6 lineal feet of 1/2-inch diameter dowel glued into all of these joints. You guys have made it abundantly clear that I need a rawhide mallet for assembling wooden parts like these. That a steel hammer is just plain bad form, and I guess you must be right. But in my defense, this little hammer has a very smooth face, really almost polished. And the 2 hammer tracks that I actually made putting this thing together easily sanded right out. And I knew that when I was doing it, that I wasn't hurting one thing. But when I asked Kenny about this, he mumbled something like, "Yes, you should be using a mallet, but there's really only just so much that I can do." Now, I've been a little concerned for a while about sanding some of these big joints back nice and flat. A couple seemed just perhaps a little too much, but 150 grit paper, nice and sharp, brought everything flat, smooth, even, really looking good, and it all smoothed up, ready for stain, just about right. Well, the frame, the carcass of this thing is done. And it's real close to real good. The dimensions are nice. And I have to say it's perfectly square. Almost. I mean, it's really square. And so now it's time for the drawers, the door and the top. It's time to start using not just the clear vertical grain oak that I've been using on this frame and on these panels, but the highly figured clear vertical grain oak that I've been sort of saving up. As you might notice, 2 of these joints needed little bitty Dutchmen, and 4 of them needed just a little sander dust mixed with glue. But Ken assures me, and I'll take his word for it, that all of this is still well within allowable tolerances. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.